It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Emily decided to take a different route through the woods behind her neighborhood. She had always been drawn to the winding trails and the peaceful solitude of the trees, where she could escape the noise of the world. The golden hues of falling leaves painted the landscape as she walked, enjoying the quiet and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Her usual route was well traveled, but today she ventured farther, just a little off the beaten path, wanting to see what lay beyond. As she rounded a corner, she saw a figure in the distance, a large German shepherd struggling to drag something along the ground. At first, Emily thought it was simply a dog carrying a stick or a piece of trash, but as she got closer, the reality set in. The dog was dragging a large, worn-out bag, its body swaying from the weight, and it seemed to be moving slower than it should. Emily's heart quickened. She could tell the dog was tired, but it wasn't just that. The way it moved was different, almost desperate. There was an urgency to its pace, and something about the dog's posture made Emily stop in her tracks. The shepherd's coat, once shiny and strong, was now thin and dirty. Her ribs were visible beneath the fur, and her eyes, though tired, were filled with a quiet determination. Emily hesitated, wondering what was going on. It didn't look like a typical stray. There was a sense of purpose behind the dog's actions, like it was carrying something important. She took a few tentative steps forward, her eyes never leaving the dog. The German shepherd's gaze flickered up at Emily, and for a split second their eyes locked. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The look in the dog's eyes wasn't one of fear or aggression, it was something else. The dog seemed to be asking for help, a silent plea that stirred something deep within Emily's chest. Without thinking, Emily moved closer, softly calling out to the dog, "Hey there, it's okay. I won't hurt you." Her voice was gentle, her hands open and non-threatening as she knelt down. The dog stopped, staring at her with tired eyes, as if deciding whether to trust her. Emily felt a surge of compassion. She had seen stray animals before, but this felt different. There was something about the dog's exhaustion, the way she carried the heavy bag, that told Emily this wasn't just a random encounter. With a cautious approach, Emily reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against the dog's fur. The German shepherd allowed it, then gave a soft whimper, her body language shifting. It was as if the dog was trying to tell Emily something. She bent down and squinted at the bag the dog was dragging. It was large and bulging, clearly far too heavy for the tired animal to carry. Curiosity and concern mixed in Emily's heart. What could possibly be inside this bag? And why was the dog struggling so hard to move it? The air around her grew still, and she felt an overwhelming sense that she had just stumbled upon something important, something she couldn't walk away from. She knew she had to act fast, but first, she needed to understand what was happening. Emily crouched down, her heart pounding, as she carefully approached the German shepherd. The dog's fur felt brittle under her fingertips, a stark contrast to the usual softness of a healthy animal. She could feel the bones beneath her touch, the strain of a creature fighting against both physical and emotional exhaustion. The dog didn't flinch, but gave a soft, tired whine, as if acknowledging her presence. Emily's chest tightened with empathy. This wasn't just a lost pet. There was a deeper story here, and she could sense it. The German shepherd shifted slightly, her eyes never leaving Emily's. There was something deeply soulful about those eyes that seemed to speak, pleading for help without words. Emily could almost feel the silent cry for aid echoing in her chest. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure what to do next. She had always been kind to animals, but this felt different. She could tell the dog was in distress, but was it safe to get any closer? Would the dog let her help, or was it too wild from the harsh experiences it had endured? After a beat, the German shepherd gave a small, resigned sigh, her shoulders sagging further as if to say, "I can't do this alone." Emily's heart ached at the sight, and a quiet determination washed over her. She couldn't leave this dog to fend for itself any longer, not when it was clear that the creature needed more than just a momentary kindness. She needed to know what was inside that bag, and she needed to help this dog. The German shepherd gently nudged the bag with her snout, as if urging Emily to look. Emily's breath hitched, her curiosity now fully awakened. What was inside? The bag didn't look like a simple sack of food or trash. It was heavy, and it seemed oddly lumpy. The way the dog had been dragging it spoke volumes. It wasn't just a burden. It was something the dog felt responsible for. Something precious. With trembling hands, Emily slowly unzipped the bag, her mind racing with possibilities. As the zipper opened, a slight rustling sound emerged from inside, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. At first, she saw nothing but dark, crumpled fabric. But as she carefully pulled the edges of the bag apart, the unmistakable shape of tiny bodies became clear. There, nestled in the fabric, were four small, trembling puppies. They were no larger than her two hands, their fur matted and their tiny bodies shivering with cold. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. The puppies were fragile, barely alive. Their eyes were still closed, their bodies limp, as though they had barely the strength to survive. The German shepherd, who had been standing quietly by, lowered her head, her eyes filling with what Emily could only interpret as gratitude mixed with exhaustion. This mother had carried her babies, her precious cargo, across the woods through thick underbrush, with the weight of the world on her shoulders. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. How long had the dog been dragging them? How had she managed to survive in the wilderness, keeping her babies alive despite all the odds? The realization hit Emily like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It was fate. The dog needed help, and Emily couldn't turn away. She looked up at the German shepherd, who now nuzzled her gently, a soft, almost pleading look in her eyes. The dog's message was clear. This wasn't just about survival. It was about trust. And in that moment, Emily knew she couldn't walk away from this responsibility. She had to help. With a deep breath, Emily gently scooped the puppies into her arms, feeling their tiny bodies quiver with each soft breath they took. Her resolve grew stronger. She didn't know how, but she was going to make sure this family had a chance to survive. She looked at the German shepherd one last time, who wagged her tail weakly, as if saying, "Thank you." The journey back home wouldn't be easy, but Emily was ready to do whatever it took. For these puppies, for this mother, for the life that she had just stepped into. As Emily cradled the tiny puppies in her arms, the weight of the moment settled heavily in her chest. The air around her felt thick with urgency. The small bodies of the puppies were so fragile, their cold, damp fur pressing against her skin. She glanced up at the German shepherd, who was still close behind, following Emily with a quiet determination. The mother had clearly been through so much, and yet she was still there, still trying to protect her babies. Emily's mind raced as she moved quickly down the trail, her footsteps echoing in the quiet woods. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of worry and hope. How had the mother and her pups ended up in this desperate situation? Had they been abandoned? Or had they been wandering for days, searching for help that had never come? Emily didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this family suffer any longer. When she finally reached her house, Emily rushed inside, the door slamming open behind her. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up in surprise as Emily burst into the room, her face pale and frantic. "Mom, you have to help," Emily gasped, barely able to catch her breath. "I found a dog, and her puppies. They're really sick, and I don't know what to do." Her mother dropped the knife, her face instantly softening with concern. "Emily, slow down. What happened?" I found a German shepherd in the woods, dragging a bag. And inside it, there were 4 puppies. They're so tiny and they're freezing cold," Emily explained, her voice trembling. "Please, you have to help them." Her mother didn't ask any more questions. She was already moving into action. "Get them inside," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "I'll call the vet." Emily carefully placed the puppies on the couch, wrapping them in a soft blanket. They were so small, barely moving. The sight made Emily's stomach turn. She could feel their little hearts beating faintly, but their breathing was shallow, each intake of air a struggle. The mother dog, Luna, had followed Emily into the house and was now pacing anxiously by the door. Her eyes were wide with concern, never leaving her babies. Emily could tell the dog was just as worried as she was. As her mother spoke with the vet on the phone, Emily gently stroked the puppies, trying to offer them what little comfort she could. She whispered soft words of encouragement, even though she didn't know if they could hear her. The tiny bodies quivered in her hands, and she could feel the heat of their fragile lives slipping away with each second that passed. Minutes felt like hours as Emily waited, her heart heavy with fear. Her mother finally hung up the phone, a look of grim determination on her face. The vet is on their way. They'll be here soon. We just need to keep them warm until then. Emily nodded, her hands shaking as she continued to hold the puppies close. Luna, the mother dog, settled down beside them, lying down protectively as if to shield her babies from the cold. The bond between them was undeniable, a fierce and loving connection that Emily could feel in the room. She couldn't help but wonder what had happened to this small family. What had they been through? What had Luna endured to bring her babies this far? As the minutes passed, Emily made a promise to herself. She would do everything she could to ensure that these puppies survived. They deserved a chance at life, and no matter how difficult it would be, she wasn't going to let them down. Luna's tail gave a faint wag as she looked up at Emily, her eyes filled with trust. Emily smiled softly, her heart full. She was in this now, and she wasn't going to let go. She wasn't going to let them suffer any longer. This family was hers to protect, and she would fight for them no matter what. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly as Emily sat beside the puppies, her hands trembling as she tried to warm them. Luna, the mother dog, lay next to them, her body a comforting presence that Emily could feel radiating warmth. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the tiny lives in her hands, each tiny breath they took feeling like a fragile gift. The sound of their faint, shaky exhalations reminded Emily that time was of the essence. If she didn't act fast, they might not survive. Her mother, ever calm in a crisis, paced the room, speaking on the phone with the vet again, detailing the state of the puppies. Emily felt helpless, wishing she could do more than just sit there. The puppies needed warmth, they needed care, and they needed food. But she was doing the best she could by keeping them close, shielding them from the cold that still clung to their tiny, trembling bodies. The front door opened and Emily's dad stepped in, his brow furrowed with concern. He took one look at the scene, the puppies, their mother, and Emily's worried face, and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Without a word, he headed straight to the kitchen to prepare a bottle of warm milk for the puppies. He was the type to take quick action in times of crisis, and Emily appreciated the way he didn't hesitate. "Do we know how old they are?" he asked, glancing at Emily as he prepared the bottle. "They're so small, they can't be more than a few days old," Emily replied, her voice thick with emotion. "They've been through so much. I don't know how they survived out there." Her father's face softened, and he walked over to gently hand her the milk. "They're lucky you found them, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. "We'll get them the help they need. You did the right thing." His reassurance meant more to Emily than he could know. It reminded her that she wasn't alone in this. Her family was standing by her, ready to fight for these little lives as much as she was. Before she could say another word, the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway caught her attention. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The vet was here. The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, entered the house with a warm smile, her medical bag in hand. She knelt down beside Emily and her puppies, immediately assessing the situation. "You've done a great job keeping them warm," she said, her voice comforting. "But these little ones need more than just warmth right now. We need to get them to the clinic for more intensive care." Emily's heart raced with anxiety, but Dr. Patel's calm demeanor helped her feel a little more at ease. Luna, who had been anxiously pacing around her puppies, settled down at Emily's side, her eyes never leaving her babies. Dr. Patel gently examined the puppies, her hands precise and professional. She checked each one carefully, making sure they were stable enough for transport. "We'll get them on an IV drip and provide the nourishment they need," Dr. Patel explained. "It's a good sign that they're still breathing, but we'll need to monitor them closely. The next few hours are critical." Luna let out a soft whine, her head lowering, as if she understood. Emily leaned in close, brushing the fur on Luna's head, trying to offer the comfort she knew the dog needed. The bond between them was undeniable. Luna wasn't just a stray. She was a mother, and the puppies were everything to her. As Dr. Patel gently lifted the puppies into a small carrier, Emily's heart sank. She knew the next step would be difficult, but it was necessary. "We're going to help them, Luna," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They're going to be okay, I promise." Luna's eyes met hers, full of silent gratitude. The trust in those eyes gave Emily the strength she needed. She wasn't sure how everything would turn out, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't stop fighting for them. For Luna. For the puppies. They were her responsibility now, and she would do everything in her power to ensure they had a chance at a better life. As the vet carefully drove away with the puppies, Emily stood at the door, her heart heavy but full of hope. She had stepped into this moment without a plan, but she knew she would do whatever it took to see this family thrive. She watched until the car disappeared down the street, a small promise in her heart to never let them down. The hours following the puppy's departure with Dr. Patel felt like an eternity. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She stood by the window, her eyes scanning the road for the return of the vet, though she knew it might be hours before they knew anything for sure. Luna, the mother dog, was no better. She lay on the couch, her eyes never straying far from the door, her tail wagging every so often in the hope that the puppies would return. But Emily knew better than to give her false hope. For now, there was nothing more they could do except wait. Her mother had set to work in the kitchen, preparing a warm meal for the family, while Emily sat by Luna, quietly comforting her. It seemed like the bond between the two had only deepened since the moment they had first met. Luna, the once anxious and wary dog, now rested with a gentle trust in Emily's presence. Emily knew that the dog could sense she wasn't alone anymore, that there was someone fighting for her and her babies. As Emily sat there, her mind kept returning to one thought. What had led this mother and her pups to such a dire situation? The more she thought about it, the more the question gnawed at her. This wasn't just a case of abandonment. It was clear that Luna had been struggling to keep her pups alive. There had to be a backstory, something that had brought them to the brink of survival in the first place. Her curiosity got the best of her. She couldn't wait any longer. Emily knew she needed answers, not just for herself, but for Luna. The dog had been through so much already, and Emily felt an overwhelming need to understand the extent of what she had endured. After a long while, Emily turned to her mother, who had been bustling around the kitchen. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you know anything about this dog? Luna, she's been through so much. I just don't understand how she ended up like this." Her mother paused for a moment, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I haven't heard much about her specifically, but I've seen stray dogs around this area before. It's not uncommon for animals to get abandoned or lost, especially with the way people sometimes move or just give up their pets." She sighed, her voice tinged with sadness. "Sometimes the shelters can't handle the number of dogs in need. It's a tough world out there for an animal." Emily nodded, processing her mother's words. She had already guessed that Luna's past wasn't one of luxury, but hearing it confirmed brought a sense of heaviness to her chest. There was something cruelly familiar about the idea of a mother doing whatever it took to protect her young, even at the expense of her own well-being. Luna hadn't been given a chance, not like other dogs who grew up in loving homes. What if Luna was abandoned? Or maybe someone just let her loose with the puppies. That might explain why they were so weak, why she was dragging them in the bag. Emily said, more to herself than to her mother. Her mother looked at her, her expression softening. "You're probably right, sweetheart. It sounds like Luna had to fend for herself and her babies in a world that wasn't kind to them. It's a heartbreaking situation, but you've done something amazing by bringing them here. Not many would go that far." Emily's heart swelled with pride at her mother's words, but the sadness she felt for Luna never fully left her. It hurt to think that the mother had been forced into such a desperate position, alone and struggling. Luna wasn't just an animal to Emily. She was a symbol of resilience and the unwavering love a mother could have for her children, no matter the circumstances. As she turned back to look at Luna, the dog seemed to sense Emily's lingering thoughts. Her eyes met Emily's, calm yet filled with something more, a quiet understanding that the struggle wasn't over, but that it would be okay. Together, they would find a way to make sure Luna's babies survived, no matter what it took. The clock ticked on, but for Emily, the wait felt endless. There was so much she still needed to know about Luna's past, but for now, all she could do was be there for the mother who had come to her in a moment of crisis. She could only hope that together they could write a new chapter in Luna's story, one where the struggle was finally behind them. The day seemed to stretch endlessly as Emily sat with Luna, waiting for any word on the puppies. Luna had become more relaxed with each passing hour, her body curling up beside Emily, though her eyes were still alert, darting toward the door whenever a car passed by. She hadn't moved much since the vet had left, and Emily could tell she was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Emily sat by her side, gently rubbing the dog's back. She could feel the tension in Luna's muscles slowly fading, but there was still an undeniable sadness in the air. Emily knew that Luna's instinct was to protect her puppies, and in a way she was still waiting for them to return. But Emily could only reassure her that they were in good hands, even though she wasn't entirely sure herself. The hours passed in a blur, each minute dragging longer than the last. Emily's mind raced with worry. Were the puppies okay? Were they getting the care they needed? Would they survive? The questions gnawed at her, and every passing moment without news felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Just as Emily thought she might lose her patience, the phone rang. Her mother's voice came through the speaker, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Emily, you need to come to the clinic," her mother said, her voice a mix of relief and urgency. Dr. Patel called. "There's good news." Emily jumped to her feet, nearly dropping her phone in her haste. "Good news? The puppies are okay." Her voice cracked with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "They're stable," her mother replied, "but they're not out of the woods yet. Dr. Patel wants you to come see them." Without wasting another second, Emily rushed out the door. She didn't even tell Luna goodbye. She knew the dog would understand. The clinic wasn't far, just a few minutes by car, but it felt like an eternity as Emily drove. Her heart raced with anticipation, and she tried to focus on the road, but her mind kept returning to the puppies. Were they strong enough to make it through the night? Were they fighting as hard as Luna had fought to get them this far? When she finally arrived at the clinic, Dr. Patel was waiting for her outside. She greeted Emily with a warm smile, though there was an underlying seriousness to her expression. "Come on in," Dr. Patel said, leading Emily into the examination room. Inside, the puppies were nestled in a cozy incubator surrounded by soft blankets and medical equipment. They looked so small, so fragile, but there was a slight improvement in their condition. Their tiny bodies no longer trembled as violently as before, and their breathing had become more steady. Emily's breath caught in her throat at the sight. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding her breath until now, seeing the puppies fighting so hard for life. "They're doing better than expected," Dr. Patel explained, her voice calm but with a note of admiration. "They were very weak when we brought them in, but with fluids, warmth, and a little nourishment, they're starting to show some improvement. They're not out of the woods yet, but there's hope." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she stepped closer to the incubator, her heart swelling with relief. "So they're going to make it." Dr. Patel nodded. "I believe so. With the right care and a little time, they should be okay. But we'll need to monitor them closely for a while. They're still vulnerable." Emily could barely contain her joy. She had always known there was hope, but hearing it confirmed felt like a weight being lifted from her shoulders. The puppies were going to survive. They had made it through the worst of it. For the first time in what felt like days, Emily allowed herself to breathe a sigh of relief. The puppies weren't just going to survive. They were going to thrive. And Luna, who had fought so hard to protect them, would see her family whole again. As Emily gazed at the tiny puppies, she couldn't help but think of all they had been through. Their journey was far from over, but they had made it this far together. And in that moment, she knew that nothing could break the bond between Luna and her babies. Not anymore. The days following the puppy's recovery felt like a whirlwind, but each day brought more progress. The tiny creatures, once barely clinging to life, were slowly starting to gain strength. Their eyes were beginning to open, their tiny paws kicking and wriggling as they explored the warmth and comfort of the incubator. Dr. Patel continued to monitor their progress closely, but it was clear that the worst was behind them. Emily visited the clinic every day, her heart swelling with pride and relief as she watched the puppies grow stronger. They had begun to respond to her voice, their little tails wagging when she spoke softly to them. Emily couldn't help but feel a deep connection to them, a bond formed through the shared experience of saving their lives. One afternoon, after another successful feeding, Dr. Patel turned to Emily with a serious look. "The puppies are strong enough now," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I think it's time for you to bring them home." Emily's eyes widened in shock. Bring them home? But are they really ready? I mean, they're still so small. Dr. Patel smiled warmly, understanding Emily's hesitation. They're small, but they're growing stronger every day. They need their mother now, and Luna is clearly anxious to be reunited with them. The sooner they're back together, the better. The thought of taking them home, of finally completing the circle and bringing Luna's family back together, filled Emily with excitement, but also a sense of nervousness. She had spent so much time caring for the puppies at the clinic, and now she would be the one to care for them at home. But more than that, she wanted to see Luna's reaction. She knew how much the mother dog had been longing for her babies. The reunion would be emotional, but Emily was ready for it. That evening, after Dr. Patel carefully packaged the puppies into a soft, padded carrier, Emily drove to the clinic to pick them up. She was practically trembling with anticipation as she placed the carrier in the back seat of her car, glancing back at the tiny puppies, now awake and looking around with wide, curious eyes. The air was thick with the promise of something beautiful. Luna's family was coming home. When Emily returned home, Luna was waiting at the door, her tail wagging hesitantly as she sensed the change in the air. She sniffed the air, her nose twitching as she picked up the familiar scent of her puppies. Emily held the carrier gently, her heart pounding as she opened the door and slowly stepped inside. "Luna, look," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion as she crouched down. She opened the carrier, and the puppies, still groggy from their long journey, began to squirm, their tiny bodies moving instinctively toward the familiar scent of their mother. Luna's eyes widened as she saw her babies, her ears perking up in disbelief. The moment felt suspended in time. Luna hesitated for just a second, and then her instinct kicked in. She rushed toward the carrier, nuzzling each of her puppies gently with her nose, licking them tenderly as if to reassure herself that they were truly safe. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she watched the beautiful reunion unfold. Luna nuzzled her babies, her soft whines filled with love and relief. The puppies, now fully awake, responded eagerly to their mother's touch, nipping at her and wriggling in her embrace. Emily sat back, overwhelmed by the moment. This was what she had hoped for, what she had worked so hard to achieve. Luna's family was whole again, and the love between them was undeniable. Luna glanced up at Emily, her eyes filled with gratitude. The dog didn't need words to communicate the depth of her feelings. She was no longer just a stray. She was a mother who had been reunited with her children, thanks to Emily's compassion and determination. In that moment, Emily made a silent promise to Luna. She would always be there for her family. Together, they had overcome the darkness, and now they would build a future filled with warmth, safety, and love. The journey had been long, and there were still challenges ahead, but Emily knew one thing for sure. Luna and her puppies were home, and they were safe, and nothing in this world could ever break the bond they shared. The days that followed the reunion were filled with joy and the comforting sound of tiny paws pattering around the house. Luna, now fully reunited with her puppies, became a completely different dog. No longer anxious or fearful, she exuded a sense of calm that Emily had never seen in her before. It was as though the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders, and she could finally breathe freely again. Her protective instincts were stronger than ever, and she would follow her puppies wherever they went, watching over them with unwavering devotion. Emily found herself spending hours with the family, watching the puppies grow, feeding them, and making sure Luna had everything she needed. They were no longer just animals she had found. They had become part of her family, and she was determined to ensure they all had the happy life they deserved. It was amazing how far they had come in such a short time, and Emily couldn't help but feel proud of what they had all overcome together. The puppies, though still small and fragile, began to develop their own personalities. The little girl with the softest coat of fur was the most adventurous, always darting off to explore the corners of the house, while her brother, the smallest of the group, was always by Luna's side, seeking comfort in her presence. The other two puppies, one a quiet observer, the other a bundle of energy, seemed to take after their mother in both looks and demeanor. Luna was more than just a protector. She was their guide, showing them the world through her eyes. Emily knew the journey wasn't over. The road ahead would be full of challenges as the puppies continued to grow stronger. They would need vaccinations, training, and care, and she would be there for every step of it. But for now, they were safe, and that was all that mattered. One evening, after a long day of playing with the puppies and watching them tumble over each other in their innocence, Emily sat beside Luna on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for the first time in weeks, everything felt calm. The puppies were sleeping peacefully inside, and the house felt full of love. "You did it, Luna," Emily whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "You brought them this far, and I promise I'll always take care of you. You're home now." Luna looked up at her with eyes that were filled with quiet trust. Emily could see the depth of the bond between them, something that words couldn't fully express. Luna had chosen to trust Emily, and in return, Emily had given her everything she could to ensure her family's survival. It wasn't just about saving lives. It was about building a family, one that was stronger together than apart. As Emily sat there with Luna, she couldn't help but think back to the day she had found them, their journey from the cold, desperate woods to the warmth of her home. It had been an unexpected twist of fate, but it had led her to this moment, to this beautiful new beginning. In a world full of uncertainty, there was something incredibly powerful about the bond between a mother and her children, and even more powerful was the love that could be shared between humans and animals, a bond that transcended words. Emily looked at Luna one last time as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky. She smiled softly, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought them all to this moment, the moment where everything had fallen into place. They were home, they were family, and nothing, not the past or the hardships they had endured, could ever take that away. Together, they had created something beautiful. Together, they had a future, and Emily knew, deep in her heart, that she would never let them go.